To get started on the second portion of this project, you should have already finished out all of the rough animation keyframes for the girl swinging. What we want to do now is to use the symbols in our library to rebuild our final girl. Now, since we already have a layer on the swing layer that's established the pacing of the swing, we're going to use this as our primary layer to build out everything. So I'm going to lock down my reference layer and turn on my swing layer and unlock it. Also, while I'm on my reference layer, let's right-click on this and open up the properties. And from the properties here, I'm going to drop the opacity of it down just a bit so that it's not in the way when I place all of my parts. So bring the opacity down to 50, and we'll say OK to that. Finally, let's go back up to the first frame on our swing layer, and I'm going to turn off my onion skinning because I won't need that. With that first frame selected, let's double-click on our swing symbol. This will take us into the swing symbol editor, and from here this is where we need to open up our libraries panel and start placing on all the different parts. The first one that I would do is the girl swing hand symbol. When you click and drag this on, notice that it's a copy of the swing symbol, but it's already got the hand correctly in the right place where it needs to be, and it's wrapping around the swing. So with that done, all we're going to do is delete away our existing symbol of the swing, and we're going to place it right in the same spot. You'll know it's in the same spot because the little plus sign at the top is the alignment for the top center of the last swing. This way it'll be right in the same area. With that done, this needs to have its own individual layers. So we're going to call this the swing layer. And let's create a new layer. We'll call this the body layer. We'll spell body correctly. There we go. For this body layer, notice that there is a symbol called the girl body, head, and arm. And this entire symbol has both the head, the arm, the body, the neck, all major parts of the upper body all in one symbol. So let's drag this one on, place it, we'll zoom in. At this point we can rotate it roughly into place, and the first thing that I would do before we forget is let's select the point of rotation and let's set it down to be the middle center of her waist. This way it's going to always rotate at the same spot. Now we can roughly nudge it into place. There we go. And if your character is off by just a little bit based on your rough animation, that's okay. Remember, your rough animation is simply meant to be a guide. Now, if you need to edit any part of this upper body, you can double click on it. So let's say I wanted to edit the head. Double clicking on it will go into the isolation mode for just this symbol. You'll notice that in the symbol, everything has its own individual timeline. So later on, we'll go back and we'll add time and movement for all these different parts as well. But from here, you can go in, select the part that you need and adjust it. So I suggest adjusting the head. And even within these, there are some sub layers as well. So if I needed to move the pigtails, I can double click on the pigtail, go into isolation mode for it, and then be able to adjust these. Also note that there are two pigtails. I recommend adjusting each one individually, but keeping them at the same angle for each one. Once these are done, let's go back to the body. You can also select the arm and roughly put it into the correct position and angle from there. So readjust all the parts of the body, and then when you're finished with this, we'll go back to the original swing layer and keep adding on the different parts. The next part we'll add will be the forearm. Going down to our timeline, let's make a new timeline for it. We'll call it forearm. And from here, let's go to our library and select the girl arm forearm symbol, and let's drag it on. We'll place this one roughly where it needs to be, and I'll zoom into it. Now, as far as the rotation of it goes, it's mainly going to rotate at the wrist. So let's change our point of rotation to this top central point so that can be rotated from there, and we'll place it right here. Actually, if you look closely, there's a little plus sign, so let's put it right there, right where the wrist should actually be. We'll place it on the wrist, and we'll rotate it into place to match it up with the elbow. Now if you need to, you may need to hold down Option and drag it out just so that it overlaps and becomes the correct length from here. We'll keep it at that. Now later on, we're going to go in and remove the little line that's connecting the upper and lower forearm, but we're going to save that for the last little part. So if that's there, that's actually okay that that's happening. I'm going to zoom back out and let's focus on the lower portion of the body now. There's the lower leg and the foot. So let's go to our timeline. We'll create a new layer here and we'll call this the lower leg. And inside of this layer, we do have a full symbol that's got the foot, but we also have one that's got the leg and foot. Where is it? There it is, leg lower. So we want to have the one that's got the lower leg and the foot next to it as well. So let's click and drag that one on. And the point of rotation for this one is going to be right at the center of the knee. So let's change our point of rotation up to that central point there. Can now rotate it into place and put it roughly where it needs to be for this one. If it's off by a bit, again, that's okay. Just like with the body, this is comprised of two different symbols. If you double click on it, you can see there's going to be one layer for the foot and one layer for the shin. So we can go back and readjust those as necessary. So if I need to, I can pull my foot forward just a bit. I think that's okay for that. Let's go back to the swing layer and focus on the upper thigh and portion here. Now for her shorts and her thigh, the two different parts of this upper leg, those are going to be two separate individual shapes that we're going to be tweening to create their animation. So let's take it one shape at a time. Let's do the thigh first. Of course, this needs to be on top of the lower leg. So we're going to create a new layer. We're going to call this the thigh layer. And within the thigh layer, let's just create a simple symbol that matches what we have here. So let's grab our rectangle tool. With the rectangle selected, go over to your Properties panel and make sure Object Drawing Mode is turned off because we want to be able to edit just the shape of it. With that turned off, we can set our fill color. Let's choose the skin tone that's at the very bottom, and we'll set our stroke color to be black. And the size of our stroke can be right about 3, I believe. Let's test that out. That looks good for there. Oops, looks like I have it at 4. Set it at 3. That looks better. We can click and drag and rough in the shape of the thigh. Then you can choose your black arrow transform tool. Let's bring this top corner down to match that. I'll bring this top corner up here, and this bottom corner can be right here as well. So remember, this is simply supposed to be roughed in. Later on, we're going to go in and we're going to actually get rid of this little line that's right here. Now on second thought, I really think the thigh needs to be below the lower leg portion. That's an easy fix. Go to your timeline and click on the thigh layer. Let's drag it down below the lower leg so that it'll swap up both of their positions. And this is what we're looking for. Now we do need to have the shorts on top of the thigh. So with that done, let's create a new layer on top of here. We'll call this the shorts. And let's redraw off this shorts layer. Now on this layer, we'll do the same as the thigh. I'm going to start off with my rectangle tool. Let's go over to the properties and change the fill color. And in this case, we're going to choose the blue down here at the bottom for our fill color. Everything else will be the same. We'll click and drag and rough in the shape from there. Then use your black arrow tool to rough in the shape of here. So we'll place those corners on each part. Bring this up to here. Let's do the same for this one. There we go. And to round it off, all you have to do is click on this top portion and drag it up to get it to there. Let's round off this lower portion too. Now if you want to have a little booty bump, you can hold down your Option and click and drag. This will bring it up and give you a little bit more definition down there. Let's bring this down a bit more. And we'll round off the back just slightly as well. I'm actually going to bring this in just a bit more to right there. That looks good. The last part that we need to add is going to be her waist. And we want to add this just below the body. So selecting that swing layer, let's make a new layer below the body. We'll call it the waist. And choose the girl waist. Let's drag it onto here. Now, of course, it isn't going to be very noticeable, so I'm going to go down and turn off visibility for the shorts just so I can see that. Now we can zoom in on it. Grab your free transform tool. Let's rotate it into place and have it roughly meet up with the placement of the front of her belly and the back of there. So you may need to click on Option and click on one of the edges to drag it out just to meet those two edges as well. Now we will be adjusting this as necessary, but we're going to keep it its own individual shape. Let's back out. We'll turn on visibility again for the shorts. Now in looking at this, I can already tell that I've made one slight mistake in the stacking order of everything. Of course, I need everything to be behind the swing. So let's select that swing layer and let's drag it all the way up until it's on top of everything from here. That way you were seeing it on top of this. The other thing I need to do is make sure all of my legs, the shorts, and the thigh are below my body, but not below the waist. So I'm going to choose the lower leg, hold down Shift, shorts, and the thigh. Oops, let's get all of those. Hold that down that one and drag it until it's below the body as well. So that will put that nice and in place as well. Now we can back all the way out and see what we have. If necessary, at this point, let's also clean up maybe some of the position just to make sure everything looks good. For instance, I'm going to bring her upper body up to meet my previous one as well. So I'm just going to nudge that into place. Of course, I need to move the waist, making sure that looks good. Keep in mind, we're going to be adjusting this waist, but if necessary, we just want it to be able to connect with the belly and also the back of her upper thigh. So you can adjust the placement of this just to make sure it looks good. If necessary, you may need to zoom in. But getting it right the first time at this point is going to make it much easier to clean up and do better at future dates as well. Let's also fix this arm. So I'm going to drag it up a little bit. Then I'm going to double click on the body and fix the position of this. Let's bring it in, and I'm just going to hold down Option and bring it forward just a bit more. That way they both meet up and everything looks good for both of those. Now the last thing that we're going to add to this body is a unique little shape that's going to patch up these little lines that connect where the knees and the elbows are going to be at. And we're going to be changing up that shape as the body moves and as is necessary. So to do this, let's create one. I'm going to zoom into my knee area. And on top of this lower leg, we need to create a new layer, and we're going to call this the knee patch. Inside of this patch, let's choose our rectangle tool. And with the rectangle tool, we'll go over to our properties, make sure that object drawing mode is left unchecked, but let's change our fill color to be the skin tone, and we don't want it to have a stroke, so we're going to set that to be none. And all I'm going to do is simply click and drag and create a simple little rectangle that covers up that particular area. Now if it's off by a little bit, that's okay. If you want, you can click on the bit and drag up the shape of it. You can see what that looks like. But the main thing is we want to cover up that little line. It's going to be moving and changing position as the knee changes, so if it's not perfect now, it's only going to be seen for a few frames. Let's do the same thing for the elbow as well. Zoom in on that area. I had that other part selected, excuse me. The elbow selected. Let's go down to our timeline. Now this needs to be on top of the forearm layer, so select the forearm. We're going to call this the elbow patch. And on the elbow patch layer, we need to do the same thing. So let's grab our rectangle tool. We should already have the fill and stroke set up. And I'm simply going to click and drag over this one. And in order to get it to fit, I'm going to use my selection tool and just click on that edge and drag it down. Now you may have to select it a couple of times to see where those parts are, but the main thing is we're just creating a simple little patch. The other thing I'd suggest you do, I keep zooming into that upper part because I don't have it selected, excuse me. With it selected, you can zoom in on it. The closer you get to it, the easier it is to move these different edge pieces around. Like for instance, I want to move this right here. Let's do the same for this outer edge. For this one, we'll move that up. Because it's the skin color on top of the skin color, sometimes it is difficult to see those two. The main thing is we want to cleanly get rid of that little connecting line with those. Now let's back out and see the whole thing. Now the last thing we need to do before we start doing our keyframe animation is to make sure all of our timelines are nice and succinct. If we go back to scene 1, our main timeline, remember we've broken this down into 65 different frames from start to finish, and that 65th frame is exactly the same as the first frame. So we want to make sure that all of the timelines for the body and the parts of the body also have 65 frames as well. So let's double click and go back into our main swing timeline. And from here, let's zoom down to the 65th keyframe, or 65th frame. And I'm on the very top of all of my layers. And then let's scroll down to the very bottom, and hold down Shift and select the last frame on the last layer. Now when you press F6, this will add a new keyframe that should be the same as the first one, and it'll add plenty of time to the end of this. So this will save us a step for both of those. Now the upper body and the head need to have their own timeline too. So I'm going to zoom into it. Let's click on the upper body and double click to go into that timeline, and do the same thing inside of this upper body. So the head and all of this need to select frame 65 on each layer, and F6 to insert a keyframe for that. And let's select the head and double click on it, and then go into its timeline and select frame 65 for all of those, and hit F6 for all parts of the head as well. So if you're following along, we've added timelines to the girl's head. We can back out now to the girl's body with the head as well. I think that's the only thing that's necessary for this one. Everything else should have its own individual parts. All looks good. Let's go back to the swing and work on the lower body for this one. For this, the lower foot or the lower leg needs to have its own timeline. So double click on this one. So we'll go into isolation mode, and let's add some keyframes hitting F6 for both the foot and the shin portion. And that's all that we needed to do for those sub frames. Just remember, each little part is going to have its own individual timeline. So as we go through and pose these, we'll have to make sure to click on and add those parts right where they're at. You can return now to scene 1, and in the next video we're going to set up and do all of the frame by frame keying positions and adding the appropriate motion tweens and shape tweens in between each part of those.